and welcome to Quarter Time Podcast. I'm Lucy G.
And I'm Lucy P.
And we're here to bring you all the netball goodness you never knew you needed.
Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 17 of Quarter Time. And what an episode we've got coming up for you guys today. It has been a huge week in netball with a massive final doubleheader weekend of the VNSL with fans, including us too, allowed back into the arena, an incredible Indigenous round in SSN and some absolute corker games in the ANZ. Not only that, we also saw Britt Clark from Saracens Mavericks in a fantastic interview on body image. If you haven't seen this, head over to Sky Sports YouTube channel, which we will link to in our show notes. It was brilliant. And sadly, we also saw a screenshot from Jo Harton, who shared an image of some really vile abuse she had received after the Giants Fever game. We were heartbroken to see this, and we're sending Jo all of our love and support. If you haven't read it yet, Megan Maurice wrote a cracking article on this, which we will also link to in our show notes. Abuse of any kind is simply unacceptable, both in and out of netball, but the outpouring of love and support for Jo has been really amazing. Back to the VNSL, and things are really heating up. This episode is a big one, as we mentioned. So, Lucy G, will you run us through what we've got coming up on the show today?
I'll tell you what, I'm exhausted just listening to you give the overview of this week, let alone having done it all.
It's been huge.
It's been mental. So today we are back with our 3-word summaries this week for all 10 games of the Super League, along with our traditional games of the round and players of the round, which were super tough to pick this week, given the number and the quality of matches across the board. And for our interview, hold the phone, hold your horses. Today, we are joined by absolute netball royalty. It's only the former Aussie Diamonds and Proteas coach, all-time legend, one of the biggest names in world netball. It's the Plum. We've got Norma Plummer on the show talking about her coaching journey over the years and what she's learnt from several decades at the very top.
I am personally so excited for this one. In my opinion, the Plum is... she's basically the Albus Dumbledore of the netball world, and we cannot wait to bring you our chat with her. But before we hear from Norma, let's jump straight in with our 3-word summaries from round 17 and 18 of the Vitality Netball Super League. First up, we had Dragons versus Pulse, and I said second half storm. It was a pretty even first and second quarter between these two sides, with Pulse just looking a little bit static and both sides playing on the sloppy side. Dragons were plagued by a few injuries, and Pulse managed to capitalise in the second half, winning the third quarter by 6 and the final quarter by 11. Hats off to Lefebvre Rademan, who combined well with her South African teammate in Ziggy Berger during the second half in particular.
Next up was Stars versus Bath, and I've gone for what a mess. This local derby was a bit all over the place, to say the least, with Stars picking up 19 unforced errors, 7 of which came from Liana Leota, blew my mind, and the usually clinical Bath coming away with 14 in total as well, 7 of those coming from Sophie Drakeford-Lewis. Don't know what was going on this weekend. Stars played around with multiple combinations out on court, but weren't able to maintain any kind of consistency, despite Bath not having their best game. Although it was a win in the end for Team Bath, it was not one of their better performances to date.
Next up, we had Lightning versus Dragons, and I said dreadful first quarter. Not a huge amount to say about this one, apart from highlighting a 21-4 opening quarter, which is the highest opening quarter margin this season and gave Dragons a mountain to climb. Dragons had 62 penalties to Lightning's 33, and Lightning were able to get all their players out on court throughout the game, including Hannah Joseph, who's returning from injury. With the news this week that Tanya Hoffman will be leaving Dragons at the end of this season, we can expect some big changes from the side in years to come.
Following that was Thunder versus Stars, and I've gone for Seal the Deal. This game secured Thunder's spot in the semi-finals, and the result was pretty much as predicted. Although the second half was probably a bit too close for comfort from a Thunder perspective, with Stars sneaking back within 5 in the third quarter. To be fair, it was a much better performance from Stars, turning around a 33-goal deficit the last time these two sides met to just 12 in the second half of the season. So that's pretty good.
Next up, we had Sirens versus Bath. And for this one, I've gone for Blimey O'Reilly, which is probably 2 words to be fair, but wowza, what a game this was. Bath started the game at such an incredible pace, and they were out 5-1 in the opening few minutes. In true Sirens fashion, though, the Scottish side did not roll over, but put their bodies on the line to try and claw back the deficit. Bath were just scary good in this game, with 20 deflections to Sirens 4, just getting their hands in absolutely everywhere. And up the other end, so many of these beautiful triangle plays, and they were just textbook in all areas of the court. It was such a spectacle, this game, and Sirens did so well to put out an impressive performance against the league leaders.
First up on Sunday, it was Lightning versus Rhinos, and I've gone for Bridge Too Far. Winning this would have made Rhino's life a lot easier and a lot less stressful in the run-up to the finals, but for us fans, it made things that little bit more juicy. Rhinos were right in this, drawing quarters 1 and 2 and only losing quarter 4 by 1, but quarter 3 was Rhinos' downfall, with Lightning winning by 7. You kind of got the sense that Lightning were just more composed and in control throughout the whole game, but if Rhinos do make top 4, they've proven again that they can mix it with the best. Sending all of our love to Fitona as well, who went down in the third quarter with a leg injury, possible Achilles, hope not. Sending you our love.
Yeah, definitely. Next up, we had Mavericks versus Sirens. Oh, and this one, I said, a big one. This was a fascinating game for me. Mavs knew just how important this one was, yet they somehow seemed a bit almost lackluster. Their chatter on court was much quieter. They didn't look that hungry for it. And Sirens did an absolute solid with 14 intercepts to Mavs 6 and 19 turnovers to Mavs 9. This, unfortunately, pretty much sums up the Mavericks season for me. Lacking in hunger, lacking finesse, and lacking consistency.
Yeah, definitely. Last on Sunday was Thunder versus Storm, and I've gone for comfortable and predictable. It was an okay first half from Storm, despite being down by 8 at half time, but it was never in any doubt that Thunder would take this and take it quite comfortably. Storm have tended to be a bit underwhelming, dare I say, this year, and we haven't seen a huge amount of growth from them throughout the season. So it'll be interesting to see what changes are made in the off-season.
Next up, we had Rhinos versus Storm. And for this one, I said playing for survival. A better showing from Storm for 3/4 of this game, either drawing or staying within 1 for those 3. But Rhinos just took the mickey in the second quarter with a huge 17-7 score. It was a defensive showing off with 14 intercepts to Rhinos' name, and down the other end, it was the Wallum show with a huge 43 goals to just 6 from Dixon. Although you probably don't need to put up the shots when you can hand off to an absolute queen like Wallum, I would personally love to see Dixon put a few more up and back herself.
Yeah, definitely. Last one of the round, and oh my God, this was Mavericks versus Wasps, and I've gone for a heart attack inducing. In the words of AC12, Jesus, Mary, Joseph and the wee donkey. This game was huge. I honestly, I find watching Mavericks can actually be quite stressful. Every pass just had my heart in my mouth, but all credit to them. They did the business in that last quarter, keeping Wasps, get this, to a season low quarter of just 5 goals from Wasps.
Wow.
Mental.
Amazing. So moving on to our games of the round. This week, I've picked the matchup between Lightning and Rhinos.
Nice.
This was such a good one. And I was actually there in the copper box, and you could really sense the anticipation and the expectation that there was for this to be such a closely fought game. As we said in the summary, it was neck and neck at halftime, and the stats show just how close it was, even on penalties with 41, 18 and 19 deflections to Lightning and Rhinos respectively. Rhinos 8 turnovers to Lightning's 10. The list goes on. What this proves is that Rhinos are absolutely up there with the best of them, and despite going down by 8 goals, they should feel really proud of their performance against such a top quality side.
Yeah.
Mary Trollock was on a mad one in this game, putting up 50 of the 59 goals scored and racking up her 700th goal of the season, where she unsurprisingly tops the table for the most number of goals scored. Incredible. At the other end, Dixon didn't have her best game, putting up 3 from 6 at 50%. We know that rhinos are the most dangerous when she gets up in there and starts sinking them. And we know that she can do it. It's just about having that confidence to go to post, even when the pressure is on. All in all, this was a ripper of a game, and Lightning are on a big upward trajectory at the moment, given the depth in their bench and the different options that they're able to put out.
Yeah, definitely. This is why I think they may be tipped to take the final, because they're going upwards and Bath are potentially going downwards, plateauing. Who knows?
It's hard to say, isn't it? It's going to be close.
Definitely. So my game of the round, unsurprisingly, I've gone for Mavericks versus Wasps. This game just blew my mind. Honest to God, it was incredible. It was quite an unusual lineup from Mavs, actually, with Akua Dale in centre and Tripp on the bench. But I think it really showed a lot of faith in the youngster at such a crucial point in the season. But the Mavs defence was hot really early on in the game, particularly Gibson and Marshall. But Kwashi just seemed to be almost on like a half-second delay. Like her timing was all off, and that was reflected in the penalties. She's most penalised on court with 19 to her name. What I love is that in attack, when Mavericks have a really quick ball speed, you found that it caught Wasps unawares. And a lot of this speed came from the Corbin sisters, who actually had a fantastic game and did a mountain of work. You always got the sense that Wasps would win in the end. You thought they'd come away with it, but that fourth quarter was something else. With Joe Tripp coming on at halftime, that was definitely the turning point for Mavs. And this is one of the only games that they actually seemed hungry for it. But why is it that we only see this at the last gasp attempt and not throughout the season? It all just fell apart for Wasps in that final quarter. They had absolutely no answers to Mavs whatsoever. And like I said in the summary, a season low quarter score of just 5 goals. I mean, what a time for that to happen. Interestingly, both teams only had 6 unforced errors, but when we were there watching it in person, it felt like Mavs actually had a lot more. But maybe it's going to sound really mean. Maybe that's just because that's what we've come to expect from them. I don't know, but it was a great game.
Yeah, definitely a really good game. I actually thought that bringing Giselle Allison on in those last few minutes was really harsh because she was put into this pressure cooker. She hasn't had a huge amount of minutes this season, and she was basically brought on to win the game. And I think she had one missed part, like bad pass or something, and then a missed shot shortly after that. And I just thought that change, I don't know why you would make that at the last second. It was obviously a big roll of the dice, but did it pay off? Obviously, not.
Yeah, I don't think it paid off at all. It's really unfortunate for her. But on the flip side, if she'd come on and done the business, everyone would have called that a stroke of genius. Yeah. So it really is like such a roll of the dice. But yeah, unfortunately, it just did not go Wasps' way.
So true. So as we know, the race for top 4 was blown wide open again by this game. And we've still got 4 teams in contention for that final spot. Rhinos have got 2 games left, playing Pulse and then Dragons. Wasps have got 1 game left against Storm, and they're not playing in round 20, so they're going to be all sweating on their sofas, I think. And Mavs have got 3 games left, Bath, Pulse and Storm. And Sirens have 2 left, Dragons and Thunder.
So this is where it gets super juicy. Okay, so I'm going to run you through some potential scenarios. So if all teams win all of their games, Mavericks will enter top 4. If Mavericks lose to Bath, but all of the others win all of their games, Rhinos will enter top 4. Assuming that Wasps win against Storm, Wasps are reliant on Mavericks, Sirens and Rhinos all dropping a game. Sirens need to win both of their games and rely on Mavs and Rhinos dropping a game to get top 4. And if Sirens win both of their games, then that is Wasps out of contention for top 4 entirely. But they do have Thunder. as one of their opponents. So if you're a betting person, you would probably say that Mavericks are likely to lose to Bath and Rhinos would likely win against Pulse, which would mean that Rhinos are statistically more likely to enter the top 4. But Mavericks are the only ones who have defeated Bath this year. So literally can't call it. No one knows.
Oh my goodness. That is crazy. I can't believe how close it is. The points literally are 31, 30, 29, 28. It's so tight. I can't believe it. Well, we'll have to wait and see, but that Bath game is going to be huge. Moving on to our players of the round. So, Lucy G, who have you gone for this week?
So I've gone for Taylor Cullen.
Nice.
I actually can't believe that we haven't had her already, because I swear we write her name down in our notes as a potential player of the round every single week. And she's actually one of the players who's impressed me the most this season, partly because I knew absolutely nothing about her. I will confess that. So it's been a real delight being able to watch her and get to know her and her style of play. I think the mid-court trio of Abernethy, Dix and Cullen is just so slick. And I think it's actually that partnership, that combination that helps Cullen look so great as well. I think she's quite similar to Nat Panagari in the sense, like the workload that she contributes every week. She is such a steady Eddie, so reliable, absolute grafter. She's just phenomenal in wing defence, in my opinion. But I would actually love to see how she goes in centre. Not that I want to, boot out Abernethy, like she's just as incredible, but I'm just really curious to see how she would go in centre because she's got such a great drive as well. I don't know. I just think she reads the play really beautifully. She had some screaming intercepts this round, and she actually had the most intercepts on court for the Bath Sirens game, and then the joint second most behind Vincumbo intercepts against Mavs. So yeah, she had a stellar round. Who have you gone for, Luce?
So I've gone for another one that I can't believe that we haven't had already so far this season. It's Kim Borgia.
Yes.
She had a great weekend, scored 30 from 34 against Stars at 88%, which to anyone else would have been an exceptional performance. And to her is pretty much just another day at the office. And in the Sirens game, it was a whole other level. And she shot 39 from 40 at 97%.
Jeez Louise.
Mental. Her movement is insane. And the way she takes the ball in the air with one hand is ridiculous. I actually thought she should have a partnership with like Monster Munch or something, because that claw just needs its own trademark. It's iconic. And the partnership that she has with Sophie Drakeford-Lewis is phenomenal. And their movement has just had defenders scratching their heads all season. Borgia's also the most accurate shooter in the league with 93.6%. And I genuinely struggle to know what she could possibly work on. Like, what does Anna Stenbridge say to her? Oh, you missed one goal in the entire game. Better sharpen up next week. Like, what are those conversations? It's insane. So an awesome week from her. And yeah, long overdue Player of the Round award for sure.
Yeah, definitely overdue. I actually can't believe we haven't had her before. That's mental. Yeah, she's an absolute queen. And what I love most about her, I think, is like the speed of her footwork. I don't know how she does it. Like, it makes me dizzy almost. She's just incredible.
She's so nimble.
Isn't she? Oh, mental. But yeah, she's amazing. Had a great week. Coming up next, we chat to the legendary queen of netball. It's Norma Plummer. With a coaching career spanning 6 decades, including 8 years as the Aussie Diamonds head coach, Plummer has literally done it all, completing her time at the Diamonds with 67 victories from 89 tests, a success rate of 75%. Stay tuned to hear our chat about what Norma has learned from her illustrious career and what wisdom she hopes to pass on to the next generation.
It is such an honour to be joined by the one and only Norma Plummer. Welcome to the show, Norma. How are you doing?
I'm very well, ladies, very well. And pleased to be here too.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's really just fantastic to have the opportunity to chat with you. There is so much we want to discuss with you as you've had such an incredible career to date. So it seems only fair that we start back at the very beginning of your elite netball journey. So we know you began your playing career in 1962, making the Diamonds team in 72 and winning your first cap for the Aussies in 75, along with gold at the World Championships in that year. And in the late 70s and early 80s, we know that you're a player coach at the state league level. So this was obviously really early in your career, and you've no doubt learned a ridiculous amount since that first gig as a player coach. So what were you like, and what kind of coach were you back in those days?
Well, firstly, when you played club level, and I was invited into the Melbourne Netball Club, which is technically now what you see as Vixens, and I coached Simone McInnes for her whole career. And basically, club level, we didn't have a coach on the sideline. The only time I got a coach was when we made the Victorian teams, whether an underage or, the senior team. So I often just say to people, they say, oh, well, how did you get into coaching? Well, I fell into coaching. It wasn't a design thing. I just wanted to be this player, you see. But when you coached one of the teams in the Melbourne Netball Club, we had this figurehead, Anne Henderson, who in her own right was really she was a bit of an icon in the game, an ex-Australian player. She was ex-Australian president, Victorian president, and she basically would put the club together and bring the teams in, but she had the luxury of being able to bring in the Australian schoolgirls because she was involved with that. So you got all this cream coming into the Melbourne Netball Club, and we had something like 7 teams. Well, she didn't sit on the sideline to coach us. So, if you're in one of the teams, and here I am at 14 and 15, and they've got to have someone as a captain. And so you do a vote, and for some reason my head kept coming up for captain. Now, don't ask me why. I always had this feeling that nobody else wanted to do it. That was the only reason they made me captain. But you had to collect the money. You had to take that into the clubhouse. You had to fill out the score sheet. You had to say who was playing for the day. So all of a sudden, when it's the break at the first quarter, there's no one there telling you how you're going. So I, naturally would put in what I felt. Well, over the years, that had been the best grounding, I think, any coach. Forget all your theory type coaching. This was the practical, down to the nitty-gritty, and you had to make the decisions. And I value that time so much that even when then I'm, later in the Victorian, the Victorian Open team, but even with the Melbourne Netball Club, in Melbourne Blue, which was the top side, we're winning, 10 grand finals in a row, and you're still making decisions, right? Yes, probably a slightly elitist club. We got all the cream that kept wanting to come to us, and we didn't have to recruit. And so, but in saying that, it set you up for, I always didn't just sit there and think about the game that way. When I was that 14 or 15-year-old, I would go and watch our number one team. And those players were playing like, Joyce Brown, who's a former Australian coach. So I was watching Joyce with June Nacida up against her and all these former players that had played for Australia. And I actually would always look at certain moves they'd make, and I'd think that'd be easy to cut off. So tactically, I was always very interested in how the game was being played. So when it got to about 1977, for some reason, no one put their hand up to be the Victorian state coach. And Mary Draper and Julie Hornwig coached over there for a while in England, and she also, I think, has worked with Ireland and that. Julie's mum was on the board of Netball Victoria, and she came and said to me, oh, look, the board would like to know if you'd like to coach the Victorian team. And I sort of looked at her and said, well, hang on a minute. I thought I was still good enough to go up and try and be selected as a player. And she said, no, we want you in the role of playing coach. Because I was, I guess, having the success with the Melbourne club, and they saw that, well, you know, it could be something different. And it was. I think I was the first playing coach at a national level. Now, in saying that, also wasn't stupid to, from one degree, I said to them, well, unless I had the full board support, I'd find that hard to do. But they assured me that I would have all their backing. But I also knew that, you know, out of our Melbourne team, out of 7 on the court, that it'd be at least 5 that would make it, because they're already all Australian players. And so, you know, the other 5 would also be made up from quality out of the other clubs. And so, you know, it's when you start at that level, then it becomes very tactical. So won the championships for 77 and 78 back to back. And then in those days you could step away, and, you know, I had a bit of responsibility to the family to give back, and then you could go back again later. You know, you could put your hand up if you wanted to coach again. These days, if you stepped away like that, you might never get the gig again. But back in those days, it was, you know, because they weren't paid positions. You got a bit of an honorarium in the end, only because I lived a fair way out. I got a little bit of income to cover the travel and also the, you know, the running of the team. But you didn't have staff that were like performance analysis people. Like everything I learned, it's all up here. And I didn't, you know, because I'm on the court, I didn't have to wait till quarter time or half time to get them to change up the game. I was already calling it on the court, and I found that sensational, that you didn't have to rely on waiting for a break, because you had to pick your top 7. You couldn't interchange unless there was a major injury. And literally, you know, what you were doing at the time had to get you over the line. So I think one of my wing defence at the time, Pan Redmond, she always says, well, you used to just give me a shove and push her off, you know, on where I wanted her to go, because this was the difference between winning and losing. So I guess, you know, if you spoke to other coaches, no, it wasn't sitting down there having to look at a video and give feedback to other people, hierarchy basically, and tell you whether you're going to get your level 3 or no. It was all practical, and basically I love it, because I still to this day I study players, and you can always find where their weakness is if you look long enough and hard enough, and that gives a big insight to your own players if you can teach them a couple of little precious little movements that could make a difference in their game. And plus the other thing is, I never promised what I couldn't deliver to players. They always said I was direct, but I saw a lot of coaches turn around and promise a lot of stuff that they never delivered, and I vowed I'd never do that, because I don't think you can do that to a player. You've got to be open and honest and say what you think, but you give them all of your knowledge. You don't hold back on that knowledge. You hand it over to them, and hopefully, you know, some will make it still and some might not just quite cut it.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we know that you became the Australian under-21s coach in 1995 and also picked up back-to-back World Youth Cup titles in 96 and 2000. And you then introduced an under-21s team, the Canberra Darters, into the Commonwealth Bank Trophy. So you've spoken a lot about the importance of bringing through young talent and providing opportunities in various media coverage we've seen of you. And so of all the young players that you've coached and nurtured over the years, who did you enjoy watching the most, and who gave you the most headaches by maybe not fulfilling their potential?
Yeah, well, there'd be a few there, but just to give you the slight background on that, I was working for Adidas, and the CEO of Netball Australia at the time, I was the under-21 coach, but the AIS had the AIS program, and they were struggling to get players there because of the National League. And Pam Smith was the CEO, and she actually phoned me and said, look, we want you to move the team, the under-21 program, into the AIS. And I had to really think about that. It was like, I'm leaving Victoria, I'm going to Canberra, I'm going to have to set up there. And but I did feel at that stage this was where netball was going to take a change of having coaches in a paid position so you could live, and things were moving forward. So I took the job at the AIS, absolutely loved it. I had, yes, quite a few players go through the realms of the AIS program with me that went on and made it to the top. The actual program itself, and unfortunately, it's not there at the moment. It was the breeding ground for everything that went up to the national team. Like, it gave players, because they weren't just coming in for the odd camp, they were there on site, on scholarship, day in, day out, and whether they were there for 1-2 years. Occasionally we might have had one for 3 years, but usually by that stage they've been picked off by, well, it was the Commonwealth Bank Trophy then, and moved out. But my argument then with Netball Australia was that the darters, as that turned out to be, had to be in the National League, and I had to fight very hard for that. They didn't believe that a development team should be in there. You know, it took me a couple of seasons to get them in, but when we did, they said, they'll all finish bottom. Well, we didn't. We finished 5th, and we did very well. We beat quite a few of the top teams in our second round, the second half of the season, because it takes you the first, say, 6 months to get the team organised. I mean, a lot of the kids come in and, so they were 18 to 21. They'd come in, yes, we've done a weights program, yes. Well, I tell you what, they hadn't done a weights program. They hadn't really trained that hard. And it's teaching them skills and what it means to be polished on those areas. And, it was like fantastic. I loved every moment of it. Monia Gerard, who you would probably know, of course, Mon was only associate scholarship holder. She was one who was a little bit not sure she would have handled the AIS, and so we also had opportunities for players like that didn't want to be full-time but could come in and out. Natty Von Berto was one of my captains at the AIS. So there's been quite a few of the players go through. Prattley, she basically was there for the 3 years, and I had Pratts for, even bringing her in when she was only 16 before she turned 18 to, because this kid had talent and she read the game. I love seeing that development on how they went, because the first year they'd come in, they'd sort of be all a bit green. The second year they would nail it because they knew what it was all about. And so that's how we got into the National League. It did take a bit of fighting, though, with Netball Australia to get us in there, and against all of the clubs said, no, it's a development team, they wouldn't do it. Well, when you knock off Swifts and their home ground, in the first round they got us by 20 goals. Second round we beat them. They only have to be shown, and I love that part of it. I love the development of that. It was also when I took over the Australian team after all the retirements out of the Australian team, and they'd lost in Jamaica to New Zealand in 2003, and I took over in 2004. There was a fair bit that those players were the players that came up and actually stepped in. So it took about 6 months when they hit the Australian team. We got hammered by New Zealand for a while, but we turned it around and won the world champs. But some of those players, were outstanding. And, of course, you had to look at people like Kath Cox, Liz Ellis, all been through the AIS. Sherelle McMahon hadn't. She was at the VIS. But most of those players, I'd say 75% to 80% of the players that made Australian teams for many years. Megan Anderson's another one who is now coaching. Rosalie Jenke is another one that I had coached all her career. So, but they're the players that actually kept Australia at the top. It worries me at the moment that I don't think we have that level of, development, because I know all the clubs would be working hard on it, but it's not a full-time program like ours was. Like, you turned up every morning and you did either weight session, and then, you would have had an individual by about 11 o'clock, and then you might have had a team session in the afternoon. The next day you would have had 2 specialist sessions and like 3 times a week weights. It just taught them how to be professional. And I'm not sure that a lot of the academies can do that. They don't have them on a full-time basis. That makes a massive difference when you can have those players like that all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's fascinating to hear about that program and how heavily you were involved in it. And you've mentioned there when you took over from Jill McIntosh in 2004 as the head coach of the Diamonds, they just lost that World Cup and you had those retirements to contend with. And we read that in your first years of your tenure, the Diamonds lost 8 of their first 10 clashes against New Zealand, including the 2006 Commonwealth Games. And we know that these losses can often be by very small margins. And with Lisa Alexander, of course, we've seen that the world of elite netball can be very brutal. And a couple of those near misses can be really just game over. So we wondered what was going through your head at this time. Did you have confidence in your process and whether you would pull through this sticky patch?
Yeah, I did actually. Always had confidence in myself as a coach because I knew where we sat. You can't lose a Kath Harvey and a Nicole Richardson and Schultze and expect that you're going to be just walk on the court when some of those AIS kids had not even been given a go to train with the Australian team, which is something I learned from that. I always brought up players that were at the AIS because we would train there as the national team and bring them in and work them with the senior side. So that was the next level for them to get that opportunity to understand what the pressure was going to be, how much harder they had to work, and they might have thought they were right there, but then they had to actually really take another step to go higher. Now, I'll correct one thing, that's wrong, it wasn't 8-2, it was 7-2. And, I had one bad loss when Liz Ellis did her knee in 2005 in New Zealand. I think we lost by 23 goals. At the Commonwealth Games, I also had Liz was going to play on, but she wasn't available because of the knee. I didn't have Gerard. We'd lost a fair bit of backline experience. So we played the Commonwealth Games and, yes, we lost, but we made up those 23 goals. I think they beat us by 2. And so I knew the turnaround was coming. It was a matter of having the support. And we had a new CEO who, unfortunately, she was more after having the high profile for herself, I think, and except knowing what was going on with the team. So that turned because before the World Series and after the Commonwealth Games, it was a matter, we won 7 and they only won 2. So it took that bit of time to get the players up to speed that, and once you've had a fairly bad defeat, players can drop the head. So it's about telling them how good they are and also pointing out, as I said, being able to break down the opposition where they knew, because New Zealand were playing the full court press, as we called it, right through the mid-court. But I'd worked out that if you sagged them in one direction, you had a whole channel down the opposite side to where the overload was. And we could swing a ball and then had them on the chase. And that's how we started to break them open. And I'll go as far as saying that they had some of the best teams in that era. So it took a lot of work, but winning that 2007 World Championship in New Zealand, which was supposed to be in Fiji, and they even put it in a stadium that was where we'd lost by the 25 goals instead of going to the big stadium, Victor Stadium in Auckland.
Wow.
But you see, I never have suspicions or superstitions about that stuff because the court area doesn't change, right? The lines are there, the same dimensions. You just have to play the game. So I was pretty confident that we could stand up and deliver, and we did, and I think we won that one by 5. So, yeah, I've loved my connection with New Zealand on court. Also, a lot of the tit-for-tat off court. It's been a bit of fun. But to me, it's friends before and friends after. I never take it that seriously. At the time, yeah, I'll work my butt off to beat you. But, you know, it's all about understanding the game. And it's a game. So it's not life or death. As I've said to a lot of the players, I've never seen anyone die of sweating a lot. So, you know, it's a matter of you've got to work. You've just got to work in these games. And it's like sensational netball when you played that. The one thing I wanted to do when I did finish after winning the World Champs in 2011 was hand over a winning team and a reasonably young team. And Alexander had the luxury of having 12 World Championship players hand passed to her. And I think that's really important because I think at the moment where we sit, there's a few nervous players out there. They've got to get the belief that they can do it because I'm not sure in the crunch at the moment that there's anyone there that might be able to lead that through. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see. But the door's wide open, I think, at international level at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're holding out for next year, retaining our Commonwealth Games gold, I'm sure you can imagine. So it's interesting there you mentioned being outspoken in the netball world and some of the off-court things that went on. So we came across a particular comment that you made in the early days of your Diamonds coaching career, which I think you probably will remember, which caused a bit of trouble with the New Zealand press. And I think you referred to the Kiwis as a bunch of scrubbers, which I thought was hilarious personally. And this was sort of taken wildly out of context, misinterpreted. And, you know, it's clear that the pressure of being a national coach in terms of the media and the press is sometimes something that can be really difficult to contend with. So how did you navigate this? And how do you think that the level of media scrutiny for coaches has changed in recent years?
Well, I guess that was the start of it. You know, you were always told you weren't allowed to rock the boat. Well, it wasn't that I rocked the boat. It was that I did an interview with a Canberra reporter. And we sat in the office. And so this is when I was first taking over the team. And he, you know, we sat there and I said how New Zealand had really played so well at 2003 at that Jamaica World Cup Grand Final. And we'd finished the interview and I walked the reporter out of the AIS office. And as he was going out the door, he turned around and he said to me, "Oh, so how do you think you'll really go?" And I said, "Yeah, it'll be tough, but just a bunch of scrubbers." Like it was just a throwaway line. Now, why did I say that? I've got no idea. But see, scrubbers in our time, back when I was playing, well, you know, when I started like mainly the 60s, 70s, the scrubber was, the bottom team, you know, they were rough and ready, and it was just a bit of a throwaway line. Well, the next day after that, we were having the Commonwealth Bank Trophy breakfast, and it was in Sydney. And I was walking up the steps, and all of a sudden I thought, oh, what's happening? Because all these reporters were running down the steps, and then I've done a double take and thought, oh, my God, they're coming for me. So it was all the New Zealand press. And, yes, they really go in. They didn't want to actually take it in that it was a throwaway line. Look, I'm a female. I would never denigrate any female like that. My daughter rings me and said, "Mum, why did you say that?" And I said, "Well, it was the bottom team to us." She said, "Well, I don't call scrubber that these days." And I said, "Well, I'm not out at the discos. How would I know? You know, you've got to be joking." Okay, it's changed. Oh, look, they took ages to get over it. And there was one guy who was quite nasty. And he said, "I suppose you think we're cheating." And this happened on TV. And I said, only cheating me done around here as if I was married to you. Because I couldn't believe he actually came out with it. So, yeah, you do have to be on the front foot, but that's how the scrubber comment came out.
Moving on to the time where you were a coach for South Africa, it was around the 2015 World Cup that you started to be heavily involved in coaching in South Africa. So after going from the Diamonds, I imagine there were a lot of differences in terms of the professionalisation, the resources, support structures, etc., that were available for a national coach of a nation who were outside of the top four at that time. So can you take us through what some of the key differences were and how you handled the difference in terms of netball culture and the attitude towards the sport in South Africa?
Well, I'd seen South Africa before 75 when I was in the Australian team that won the World Championships in New Zealand, but I'd played them as, I think it was 72 or 3 in Victoria, where the Victorian team I was in were playing against them, and we had all of the Melbourne University students come out, and there was big protests from there because of apartheid, and they were right up there then. They were a force to be reckoned with. But after that, of course, with apartheid, it all sort of went out the door, and we didn't see them again. And every time then when they were welcomed back in, they weren't actually finishing off, and their game hadn't improved, I felt, from the aerial type of ping-pong game they like to have to being, more like Australian style, low and hard, and actually working the ball. So when they asked me, it was only about 5-6 weeks out of the World Champs, would I actually, take them to the World Championships? I said, well, yes, I can do that, but I would want my own assistant coach. And that's when I brought in Nick Cusack, because I felt at that stage you can't be coaching the players and coaching other coaches. I needed someone that could go and look after shooters, do the job. I could turn my back on, know what she's delivering, because, she's an ex-Australian player. She'd worked with me with the Diamond. She knew exactly how I ticked. She was on the same level of the way I thought about the game. And so that was always going to be, if they allowed that, then it was on. So that's how it came about, and Nick was allowed to join me. And I just found it refreshing, but I also found it that you knew the underlining factor was they had this, we're not quite that good enough to be able to do that. So I sort of started off with them and said, look, we're going to go out. You've been beaten by Australia, England, New Zealand over the last, lot of years. If you look back the whole history, anywhere between 35 and 55 goals, right? So they're pretty big margins. We're going to drop these margins. That's got to be our first objective, to be able to then start to compete. And we did. We were able to teach him. And it was purely about, courtcraft. I can remember Bongi Masomi, she's running centre and the ball's coming out of the back end at one stage and she's on the wing defence line on the sideline. And I said to her, what are you doing over there? And she said, I'm clearing. I said, but the ball's coming through the centre. You're the centre player. You've got to be there to ready to take on the ball, take on the players, No use this clearing stuff. Look at all the ground you've got to make up to get to the circle. And I was teaching them to stand there and shoulder to shoulder their player and be able to take the timing move, when to go, and how to have who's going, who's not, who should be working that space. They didn't actually work systems to that point. And I found that they really started to pick up the game when they knew what their role was. And that was very important. So gradually but surely we're dropping the score lines down. And next minute, like everybody's only getting us by 3, 5, 6 goals. They're not beating us by 35, 55 goals. And, before the World Champs, we played that quad series in the January in London at Copper Box.
Yeah, I remember. I was there.
Yeah, so was I.
So we beat England, and England were really cheesed off because they thought if they'd won that, they would have won the series.
Yeah.
You always got to be prepared. You never go in. You've got to be prepared that you may not. But also the controversial bit when we played New Zealand, and I both had Maria and also Dame Nolene say that I'd won that game, and we definitely had won that game, but the scorers mixed it up. If you remember, we had to play the extra, but and then we lost it in the extra time. So we were on the money, because even Australia only got us by about 3. So we're on the money, and all I needed to say to him, you're as good as any player that you are going to play against. They're no better than you. You just get in there and you have to do your job. You know what your job is and you can work it. And it's about self-belief, because they needed a lot of that self-belief. And I knew it would be a big ask to get into the grand final at Worlds, but my hope was that we would make the 4. And I knew Jamaica was the thorn in the side, because we definitely had the hardest pool. Australia and New Zealand were playing everyone from 7th down, and we're playing everyone from 7th up. So we had Jamaica and England in our pool. But that was all right, you know. And then Jamaica, you know, came out and we got that win. I was so proud of the players, because to me, to beat Jamaica was as good as, you know, making the grand final, because like that was massive hurdle to get over, and they did a marvellous job. But then to take on Australia and only lose by 2, it was one pass at the end that blew it. Yeah, shame. And by the time then we played for the bronze, they'd run out of legs, because only had sort of half the players were playing overseas, the other half were still back in South Africa, and they only had a 3-week competition. So it was very hard for them to have the same build-up. And as far as, you know, the fitness component, Dorette Badenhurst's coach now, like Dorette did a great job trying to work with those players and keep them up there. But, you know, when you don't have the competition, that's a bit tough. But look, I loved every minute of it. I really did. I thought to see them expand and the way they explored their game and just got better and better. I think Nick came up to me one night and she said, well, I've just had one of them say, wish I knew this 10 years ago. You see, and then you start to understand that they just hadn't been out in the international arena. And I think from a point with South Africa, I'd love to see them get their coaches out there more in the international arena, because it's really important if you don't know what's going on and, you know, how all teams operate, and it's having the insight to be able to then put your team together and get them in readiness to come up against the pressures that are going to be on in that game. Yeah, and look, such a fantastic bunch of girls. People said to me, oh, you're a bit soft with this group. And I said, well, it wasn't about being soft with this group, but I had to go very lightly at first and make sure that they understood what was required. But by the time we got to the World Champs, I said to them, the honeymoon's over. This is it. You know, it's all about performance-based, ladies, and no excuses. It's performance-based, because players also have to have a reality. Doesn't matter what position you hold in the team. If it means that you're not performing, whether you're captain, vice-captain, or in the leadership group, you're off. When I have a player that I've also trained who can come out and do the job, it's not personal. It's about, firstly, getting the team, the win for the team and the organisation. It's the organisation that's paying your wages. You always have to remember that. And I think that I've said that to a few international coaches. It's not about, you know, you may, over your time, really love a certain player more than another one from a personality point of view, but that should never come into it, because you'll burn yourself. You have to, whatever you do for the team. So when South Africa saw that it didn't matter what colour you were, if you were off and on, and they saw that a lot, they knew that it was performance-based and it was fair and equal. That's I think, the best thing you can do. You've got to make it, because players work out very quickly if you have a favourite and you're coaching someone and you don't give them the same attention. It stands out and they pick it up and they feel it. as I say, fair and equal for as far as I'm concerned.
And you've mentioned there passing on your wisdom to some other nations, and we know that you've done lots of mentoring and things like that. And you must have seen over your career netball change so much in all different aspects, from those first early days where you were playing outdoors to now, big stadiums and arenas. And in terms of strategy, professionalization, physicality, the game is so completely different. So where do you see netball going in the next 50 years? And what are your hopes for the sport in the future?
Well, I probably won't be here in 50 years.
You're going to live forever, Norma. What are you talking
exactly.
about?
I'd like to think it, but I wouldn't want to be 50 years older, and could hardly no. Look, I am on the international coaching panel. I've been in the game a long time, and I look at it and I get a little bit, I suppose, disappointed at the fact that it's the equality that, certainly in like some of the African countries, they're not given the same backing and support from governments or wherever. And that how good they could be if they could, tap into the finances to be able to train all the time and be able to stand up. We would have far more teams nudging the top than what we have now. So in all my time, it's been Australia, New Zealand, England occasionally, up until now they're coming in, and then, Jamaica's been there but haven't quite made it. And if any team should have won a gold medal, I think it's been Jamaica. I've seen them right up there again, losing by 1 and 2 goals. And they were all in the States playing basketball or volleyball, came back, trained for 2 weeks and then took us on and only lost by 2 goals. Like, I mean, seriously, the athletic ability is just sensational. And now, to get South Africa, as I said, to make the 4, it's about that belief, but their organisations do have to support them. And I know it's a tough ask. And but I just don't know how IFNA's going to penetrate that and help them. I hope that from a coaching point of view, it'd be great now if the budget could see that that we could be out, not at the World Championships, as I said on our last Zoom, that we turn up at the World Champs and they do a clinic. That clinic should have been done 2 years ago. So all those coaches that were coaching all the players that were coming through to be in their national team had the insight of all that knowledge to be able to do it at their training and getting them ready. So things like that, I think, would be a big asset, to have experienced coaches out there and about. Because what do we get? We get COVID and we can't go anywhere. So, it sort of has hit that on the head at the moment. But that will change and life will get back to some normality. But I would love to think that the support in those areas would lift those teams right up there. I mean, I'm an Australian through and through, and I want to see our Australian players win. But I also have to look at the game and go, well, all these years it hasn't changed much at the top, and it's only because we have the best government supports here, and so with New Zealand we have all of that, and you guys have that, so it's got to be that hopefully women's sport can challenge, their governments and get support somehow and sponsorship and get all that to make them better, because the talent's there, it just needs the opportunity. So, yeah, unfortunately in 50 years I won't be here to see it, but I hope it happens. I do hope it happens. I think we've got a brilliant sport. I love our sport, so much passion for it, but yeah, it would be great.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Norma. I think that's an absolutely brilliant note to end on. And fingers crossed we get to chat to you again sometime soon. It was really awesome to speak to you today. And thank you so much for coming on the show with us.
Well, Lucy and Lucy, thank you very much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope your audience certainly enjoys it, and always available to answer any questions. Thank you, ladies. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, Norma.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 17 of Quarter Time. We can't wait to bring you even more netball chat and another awesome guest next week.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media at Quarter Time Pod for the latest netball updates. It's another bye weekend for the Vitality Netball Super League, but fear not, there is still plenty of ANZ and SSN to catch up on, so watch away.
See you next week. Bye.